The fourth epoch is the most intriguing and lore-heavy epoch in the entirety of Lore of the Mysteries, and it is my personal favorite. So in today's video, we will be going over every single major and every single minor event in the fourth epoch. Yes, I'm talking about every single detail. On top of this, I will be going over some predictions of what events could have happened that we didn't get to see, but that I think, well, would have happened in the fourth epoch. And I'll also be going over some of the strongest characters and talking about some relationships that were sort of built up towards the fifth epoch. So yeah, without further ado, let's get straight into it. Now, the fourth epoch, also known as the Epoch of the Gods, begins with the strongest god dying, ironically. That being the ancient sun god, and of course the ancient sun god's death warrants the birth of the true creator, born for sort of mixed with the hangman uniqueness and the humanity of the ancient sun god, which is Sasra's consciousness. This creates the true creator. On top of this, the second blasphemy slate sort of materializes from the ancient sun god after his death, and a bunch of angels got their hands on it. Now, this is a problem because this is what they all use in order to advance, and multiple of them basically became sequence zeros and had massive conflicts in between them. Now, those angels in specific are of course Bethel Abraham, Solomon, Zaratul, Lisa Tudor, Trunsuist, Augustus, Einhorn, Sauron. All these various angels saw the second blasphemy slate before Adam took it away. At the same time, Adam took away another relic of the ancient sun god from himself. That is of course the unshadowed crucifix, which plays a role way further in the story, in the main storyline that we all know and love of Lore of the Mysteries. Now, moving on from this, the kingdom of silver became the city of silver. Let me explain. Because of the ancient sun god's death, the forsaken land of gods got sealed away into darkness, eternal darkness. Now, of course, the kingdom of silver, who was not accustomed to darkness at this time, they couldn't handle it, and they slowly deteriorated, lost members, etc. And as they dealt with it, they slowly shrunk and became the city of silver instead. So they had a pretty massive drop off. Now, also in this sort of beginning period of the fourth epoch is the fact that the 6 Orthodox churches were finally established. Of course, I'm saying 6, not 7, because the god of craftsmanship wasn't born yet, also known as the god of steam and machinery in the fifth epoch and our main storyline. So those 6 churches being, of course, the Church of the Evernight Goddess, the Church of God of Combat, the Church of the Earth Mother, the Church of the Lord of Storms, the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom, and the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun. So all of these churches were established because this is when the gods would roam the earth freely. Of course, this meant an extreme amount of conflicts. But anyways, let's talk about another main character that was born during the fourth epoch, and that is Solomon. During this beginning period, he made his first alliance with the Zoroaster family, and as we approach the ending of this first period, Death God Salinger became Death God Salinger. He advances sequence 0 of the death pathway, and he's an extremely important figure that will play a role way later on in this epoch, so make sure you guys tune around for that. Regardless, let's move on to the second period. Now, the second era of the fourth epoch begins, and there is a new main character called Solomon, and he established the Solomon Empire after becoming sequence 0 of the Black Emperor pathway. You guys know how much I love the Black Emperor pathway. I think it's one of the best pathways, and he became extremely strong, setting up sort of ranking of people and families under him. Now, there's some very familiar names that you'll hear in just a second. The top 3 families of his empire were the following. The first one being the Abraham family, the second one being the Zaratul family, and the third one being the Zoroaster family. All very familiar names. And of course, the Duke of the Abraham family, Mr. Dor, was rumored to not even believe in Solomon. All of these people had to worship him, but Mr. Dor was so like him. He had so much aura, he didn't even believe in Solomon. He simply didn't care, and he admitted that he, well, doesn't believe in him. And that was perfectly fine with Solomon because you cannot catch Mr. Dor. Now, regardless, the other families under him were also very familiar names, such as Medici being one of his followers and Ouroboros being one of his followers. Now, at the bottom of the ranking were 2 familiar faces that you'll probably hear about when we talk about the fourth epoch. That is, of course, Lisa Tudor and Trunsuist, and they'll come into play in just a second. But next up, and the next thing that happened in this sort of second period, is that Antigonus advanced to attend the mysteries, and he left the Hornasis mountain range, sort of the nation of Evernight that was created by his sister. He left that range and also allied himself with Solomon temporarily. Now, the issue with this sort of second period is the fact that a lot of these Orthodox churches couldn't sort of get together and form an alliance to fight back against Solomon. So basically, they were always fighting in between themselves, even though they should have been allying themselves and fighting against an evil. Now, of course, let me explain to you the exact conflict. The Evernight Goddess, the God of Combat, and Death were all fighting each other. At the same time, the Lord of Storms, the Eternal Blazing Sun, and the God of Knowledge and Wisdom were having big troubles between each other, and the Earth Mother was being her usual self and being very ambiguous, but leaning towards the God of Combat. Of course, this is referenced to way later on in the series, but I won't talk about that in this video. Now, moving on from this, at the same time as all this was happening, the Death God Salinger made his move. He allied the entire southern continent and created the Balaam Empire. So at the same time as Solomon was creating the northern continent, his Solomon Empire up there, Death God Slinger took his chance and allied the entire southern continent, creating the Balaam Empire. Of course, the end of the second era, and well, Solomon is already no longer the MC, as at least the Tutor came together with Trunsuest, and with the help of other couple gods, they took down Solomon and began their own era, which is the third one, and let's get into it. Now the next era of the fourth epoch begins, and it is called the United Era. That is because Tutor and Trunsuest are now united after they defeated Solomon together, of course with the help of the 6 Orthodox gods, and the various angels that supported Solomon now split off between them both. For Tutor, those angels that supported him now were the Tutor family, the Abraham family, the Antigonus family, the Ammon family, the Jacob family, and the Tamar family. And for Trunsuest, the following angels supported him. That is of course the Trunsuest family, the Augustus family, Castilia family, Einhorn family, Sauron family, and the Sanguines. And at the same time as all of this was happening, the primordial demoness became Sequence Zero, took control over the demoness pathway, and created the demoness family, a very strong organization. Now next up, after finally accommodating the full pathway uniqueness, Antigonus became the half-fool alongside the help of Adam and Ammon. This made him extremely strong. I'm talking about overpowered levels of strong, but made him extremely unstable, which will come into play in just a second in a few eras. Now moving on from this, Elisa Tutor finally made his move and tried to become a Sequence Zero of the Black Emperor pathway, while both Trunsuest was distracted and sort of in secret, and of course while Solomon was dead, and he built up all of his mausoleums alongside the help of Mr. Dor, who chose to ally himself with him. And ultimately this failed because Solomon eventually revived, and this ultimately led to Elisa choosing the path of madness, which I'll talk about in the next era. And this era closes off with Ezek Eggers being born, and well, yeah, he later on became the death consul of the Balaam Empire, but that is pretty irrelevant, and let's move on to the next era. Now the main character from the Solomon Empire is back, and he created the Second Empire. Basically, the Second Solomon Empire is the name of this next era of the fourth epoch, and naturally Solomon is back. But first of all, and the most major event, is the 2 other angels becoming Sequence Zeros. The 2 other angels naturally being, of course, Trunsuest and Elisa Tutor. Trunsuest got the support of all Orthodox gods and had a very easy path to becoming a Sequence Zero of the Justicia pathway. Of course, it's a neighboring pathway of the Black Emperor pathway, so it was very easy for him to switch, especially with all of his connections and everyone loving him. I mean, even the Sanguines loved him because he married the sort of queen of the Blood Moon, which was Arenia. So yeah, he was chilling, and he became Sequence Zero of the Justicia pathway. Elisa Tutor did not like this. He did not like this whatsoever, and with the aid of Adam and Ammon, he trapped all 3 Sequence 1 angels of the Red Priest pathway, and he murdered them all basically, and ended up taking all of their characteristics and advanced to Sequence Zero of the Red Priest pathway. It is not a neighboring pathway, and the Red Priest pathway will continue to play a big role in a very similar fashion later on, but for now, just think about how crazy and ridiculous that move is, how desperate Elisa Tutor must have been for power, seeing of course his comrade, being Trunsuest, advanced while he was stuck getting all the support from everyone into the world. I understand Elisa Tutor to some extent, but let me know in the comments what you guys think about that move. Now, ultimately, the Tutor Trunsuest Empire fell apart. That is the end of this era, and let's move on to the next one. Now, finally, we approach the climax of the fourth epoch and the War of the Four Emperors. Think about just for a second how many gods were walking Earth at this time. There's over 10 Sequence Zeros all on 2 continents right now, that being the 6 Orthodox gods and the 4 Emperors. On top of this, there's Adam, Ammon, a bunch of other strong angels walking around Mr. Dor. So tensions were extremely high, and after around 500 years after Tutor became Red Priest, they fought, especially the 4 Emperors. This was their battle. The 4 Emperors, of course, being Death God Slinger, and the other 3 who all have Emperor in it, that being the Blood Emperor Elisa Tutor, the Night Emperor Trunsuest, and of course the Black Emperor Solomon. So they all fought, and a bunch of consequences happened. I mean, all the angels were involved as well. So basically all the ones that I mentioned previously were all fighting as well, and most of them died. For example, Blood Moon Queen Arenia died, and the Sanguines had to retreat and were never the same until the 5th epoch. At the same time, 3 of the emperors died. So yeah, Blood Emperor, Black Emperor, and Night Emperor all perished, and Death God Slinger was the only one that survived. Now the Night Emperor Trunsuest falling, who was the Justicia Sequence Zero, this created the sealed artifact 002, one of the first ever sealed artifacts and considered to be 002, which is extremely strong, which was the Brass Book, which played a role way later on in the story, in the main storyline of course. Now there were so many consequences of this, and let me list them out for you. At the same time, after all the emperors fell, a bunch of things happened. First of all, the senior ancestor of the Zartul family got hunted down by half-full Antigonus and Mr. Dor, who could appear everywhere and anywhere at once. Yes, they were everyone and everywhere at once. That is one of the most ridiculous combos ever created in Lord of the Mysteries. Who let Mr. Dor and a peak prime Antigonus together, and they hunted down that Zaratul, and Antigonus got another characteristic for himself. At the same time, and just after that, Antigonus was hunted down by the Church of the Evernight Goddess after he started to lose control immensely, and he was ultimately sealed away in Foggy Town. At the same time, the nation of Evernight was wiped out by the Church of the Evernight Goddess, and the Mother of Sky, also known as Antigonus' sister, got turned into a vessel for the Evernight Goddess, 017 to be specific. Now, at the same time, of course, Mr. Door was sealed away. Our favorite boy was hunted down by the Evernight Goddess once again and the Lord of Storms, and they banished him. They sealed him for thousands of years until the 5th epoch, and he was finally released. Of course, this was necessary because he was corrupted, and ultimately ending off this sort of consequences thing, the, of course, only survivor and last emperor alive, Death God Salinger, benefited the most from this. As all other emperors died, he still has control over his Balam Empire, the entire southern continent, and he got the Red Priest Pathway uniqueness, which we'll use in just a second. And lastly, the last two things that happened in this epoch was the fact that Amon took down a sequence 1 of the Jacob family and took him over. Yes, like completely took over his identity and pretended to be that guy for who knows how long within the Jacob family. That is exactly what Amon does. Best boy, always doing exactly what he wants to do. Anything he wants to do, he will do. He doesn't care. Now, the last thing that happened in this era, this was a massive era, of course, the War of the Four Emperors, was the fact that the god of craftsmanship, the final orthodox god as we know, became a sequence 0 but did not fully digest his sequence 1 potion, which also led to consequences such as the hidden sage being revived. So yeah, that is the end of this era, and let's move on to the final era of the 4th epoch. Now we finally approach the last era of the 4th epoch, and things just keep getting hotter in my opinion. The War of the Four Emperors was perhaps the climax of the 4th epoch, but things do not cool off very rapidly and things are still extremely heated. Of course, that is because Death God Salinger has obtained immense power. But first of all, the remnants of the Trunsoist Empire, yes, the Night Emperor, split off and became 4 major families that ultimately lead within their own nations. First of all, the Augustus family in the Loan Kingdom, yes, they eventually gave birth to the biggest fraud of all time, George Augustus III, but we won't talk about that right now. Then, of course, the Castilla family in the Feanor Potter Kingdom, the Einhorn family in the Facesack Kingdom, and the Sauron family in the Intes Kingdom. Now, after all of these families were created, the Abraham family started to decline severely because, of course, their number 1 ancestor, that being Mr. Door, of course, got sealed away, and the Blood Moon Curse got created. So their high sequence Beyonder all perished, and it was extremely hard for them to advance. Even become mid-sequence was seemingly an impossible task, with even regular members dying, not even Beyonders. So yeah, moving on from this Death God Salinger, let's talk about him because this is his era. This is when he became the main character at the end of the War of the Four Emperors, being the only survivor, and he took over. Having the Red Priest Pathway uniqueness made him overpowered, and first of all, before he tried to accommodate him, he took measures. He is not a dumb guy. He is extremely smart, as all gods are, and he left a piece of his soul within his son Azik Eggers. Now this, of course, allows him to revive within Azik shall he unfortunately die. Of course, it isn't unfortunate because he's a complete piece of crap, which I'll get to in just a second. But yeah, he did leave a piece of his soul in Azik, which ultimately haunts Azik to this day, unfortunately. Our best boy, our best teacher, Azik. So yeah, he tried to accommodate the Red Priest Pathway uniqueness for over 100 years, but failed because it isn't a neighboring pathway one. And he ultimately went crazy, but did raise himself to the level of almost half a Great Old One, almost became sort of that above the sequence level temporarily, but he didn't manage to fully get it. But he went crazy, and he had the urge to converge with the Twilight Giant pathway and the other Evernight pathway, right? So because of this convergence, he created disasters within the northern continent. I mean, absolute disasters. He combined with this sort of demoness cheek and wreaked havoc upon everyone and everything in the northern continent, ultimately leading to the Pale Disaster. And finally, in the 4th epoch, to close everything off, the original creator's will was slowly dissipating. This meant that the barrier around the world was slowly cracking, and the outer deities started to have more and more influence on Earth. This is not a great thing, and especially with the death of the ancient sun god at the start of the 4th epoch, everything just got accelerated. So basically what ended up happening was the western continent also started to, sort of the seal on the western continent also started to dissipate, and all these Sephiroths were able to seep their power out into the world slowly and slowly, and this corrupted very high sequence Beyonders in various different pathways that were controlled by outer deities due to the law of convergence. Now, basically, what the 7 now Orthodox deities had to do, because, well, the god of craftsmanship now joined the other 6, was they had to move their divine kingdoms up into the air and sort of keep the barrier afloat, sort of mend the cracks within the astral world and make sure that the apocalypse doesn't start too early. Now, at the same time, and around all of this sort of marks the end of the 4th epoch, was the death of Death God Salinger, And yeah, he went out like crazy. There was a massive battle between all Orthodox deities versus him and Demoness Cheek, the primordial demoness. And yeah, ultimately the 7 Orthodox deities won, ultimately killed Death God Salinger and delivered a massive blow towards Cheek, and she ran away. So yeah, that is the end of the 4th epoch. All the 4 emperors died. All the main characters that came up within the 4th epoch all came crashing down, and the 7 Orthodox deities went up into the astral world and moved their divine kingdoms, and this marks the end of the age of gods. They can no longer walk on earth because they are too busy mending the cracks. Yeah, that is the end of the 4th epoch. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and please leave your suggestions, leave your reviews, whatever you want. Please comment down. If I got something wrong, please let me know. I respond like very well to these things. I would gladly have you correct me, so please do not worry. If you sort of notice something wrong, please go ahead, really. And yeah, I wish you guys all a wonderful day. Join my Discord server for some giveaways. I have some fire things coming for you guys and some announcements on there, etc. I upload manga chapters, everything there. So just join it up, and yeah, see you guys in the next one. Have a wonderful day. Love you all.